we're going to move on to something else now, onto firmer territory, shall we say. For me at least, and Matt Hancock's book, which has been brilliantly timed to be published the moment he leaves the jungle, and is about as readable as the back of a cornflakes box, and about half as informative as well. Now, there's lots about how in love he was with Gina, and how terribly he felt about dumping all over his wife and children, before he did that anyway. But in there are also lots of claims which are getting very short shrift. So there's sort of summed up here on this page. One of them is that Kate Bingham, the lead of the vaccine task force, was useless and he had to tell her what to do, which, according to her book, which is also just published, is the literal opposite of what happened. And another claim of his is that care homes were using staff who carried COVID in, and that's what infected and killed tens of thousands of frail and elderly residents. Now, carers who abandoned their families, who slept on floors of care homes, made huge personal sacrifices to keep those places safe, while Hancock was merrily throwing discharged and untested hospital patients into them, have begged to differ. They're not too happy. So, Darren, it's not like you can see it from a different perspective and they could both be true. It's literally one or the other. I suppose the question is here, who do we believe? Isn't it? Do we believe Matt Hancock?
Susie, I get upset when I hear about this kind of thing, because Matt Hancock has shown himself, that very frame alongside the words show what kind of man Matt Hancock is. Somebody who quite literally was sleeping on the job with someone else who was not his wife. And the lawyers don't want to have to come to me for that, because that picture right there tells you everything you need to know. And the picture that was taken of him at work doing something he shouldn't tells you what he needed to know, what you need to know as well.
Dancing
but also, smooching. I think...
yeah.
And I laugh, but this is no laughing matter for exactly the people that you mentioned, those carers, those people who put their lives at risk to help care for, be with patients, often in their final moments because family members couldn't be with them. The anecdotal evidence is extensive. So for Matt Hancock to write in his diaries, to put forward, shall we say, a tenuous at best version of events for money, because he's promoting this book and his version of events, when there are millions of people who either suffered with or lost family members who would tell you a very different version of events, it's just reprehensible. And the thing that concerns me the most about this whole thing is that there are, quite clearly, because of the position in which he finished in the reality TV show, there are a number of people around the country who feel that to point out these facts and these other versions of events is to get on his back unfairly. And that was what happened during the period he was on the reality TV show. And lots of people said, oh, get off his back, it wasn't his fault. And the tide appeared to be turning for him when the facts said something very, very different. And for him to put that version of events into print and proffer it to suggest that he was the person who should be shown sympathy and not the people who suffered with those people in care homes, into which so many people from hospitals with COVID were shoved. Honestly, it's just disgusting. And I'm not going to sit on the fence about that. It's not a laughing matter. I don't think we should. Listen, you and I, Susan, we work at a newspaper where we've seen and heard and read so many of the stories from the people who have suffered. So I'm not having Matt Hancock. I'm not having what I see to be lies, or, like I say, a questionable version of the truth at best.
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to ask ourselves, perhaps, is the most important question any journalist asks, which is why would he want to go in the jungle right about now? Perhaps because there was a book to promote, and perhaps because he suddenly wanted to look more human, as he said. He wanted to show his human side just ahead of a public inquiry that was going to rip him a new one. Paul says, most villains think they're the heroes of their own stories. Paul, comment of the show. Well done. You're going to get a News Agenda mug for that, because you've got it absolutely right, and you've done it far easier and more succinctly than Darren or I. So well done. Now we're going to move
but
on.
He's right. But sorry, very quickly. Paul is right. He's always been unable, Matt Hancock, to read the room. If you look at that video of him alongside Wendy, I think it's Wendy Maisie, the prospective parliamentary candidate, that was on YouTube. It was a viral video, and standing in the personal space, and he's unable to kind of read just how it looks. It was almost a trivial example of the point I'm trying to make, but Matt Hancock has zero self-awareness. He simply works to make sure he looks good in any given situation. And I think it was a very carefully constructed decision to go into the jungle because he wants to rehabilitate his image in the eyes of the public and to gaslight healthcare workers by suggesting they were at fault and not him and the people around him for his decision making. Again, all of those people, they will speak for themselves. They have done, as you say, because there's been a lot of an opinion. There has been a lot of opinion so far to the contrary in terms of what he's said. But it's just reprehensible. Absolutely reprehensible.
He's got a complete lack of self-doubt, which is why he was able to throw himself into those trials without worrying about spiders and roaches and stuff. Now, before we move on to some good news next, Darren's obviously in Qatar and he's been there for a few weeks. And Darren, you were saying to me off air that Western women are really enjoying the World Cup being held there. They're not too bothered about the repressive regime.
Yeah, I want to make a distinction between the issues here, which are ongoing around the treatment of migrant workers, around the deaths of people who've helped to build the stadiums here, and about there are issues around sexism, institutional sexism here, and a couple of other things. And there is a distinction between those things which have been an issue and will continue to be an issue here. The Qataris and the people here say that they are going to be addressed. When you go into the media centres here, there are big billboards and whatever else setting out the measures that they intend to take with the spotlight on this country and this region and the pressure on them to do that. I want to make a distinction between that and the experience that people have had coming here. Because when I got to the airport on the morning of my flight here, I bumped into a lot of people and we all had the same expression. There was a lot of apprehension about coming here. There was a lot of a suggestion that we would come here and we'd have a not very nice time, and that there'd be an oppressive culture and atmosphere. But on any given day when you walk down the streets, there are people, I saw a couple holding hands, no issues around them, nobody bat an eyelid. I've seen lots of people. They said you couldn't film anywhere you go here, you can't film. But there are people walking down the street with their selfie sticks and their cameras and whatever else. They say that you can't go around with bare arms and chest, and I think within reason, it's very relaxed. I've seen lots of Western women walking around with bare arms, and there are lots of, and I think what's been even more or most significant is that Western women coming back are telling their own stories of their experience here. And they are saying that they felt safe here. They're saying that they felt that the decision to ban beer was particularly significant because it's been a World Cup held in a culture of friendliness, warmth. There hasn't been the kind of sexism and catcalling and negativity that they've been used to in Europe. And their feeling is that they've felt relatively safe out here.
Wow.
And it's been a very instructive World Cup from that point of view.
So the culture's obviously changed a little bit in terms of the football, but of course, a lot of those women wouldn't necessarily have been raped while they were there, had a miscarriage, wanted an abortion or to get divorced, all of which they would find very difficult and very different experience than they would do at home. I don't see quite why women's rights have to involve being hectored at the football, but it does.
I think, and all of those things are true, which is the reason why I make that distinction between people's experience out here and some of the things that are embedded. And that there are, what I found out here is that there are varying levels of expertise when you look at the service industry, when you look at other areas of, you have to remember this is a very young country. It's around about 50, 51 years old. And there are lots of elements of this country that need training, that need leadership, and even around law. Listen, let's not kid ourselves that the law around rape victims in England is any better than it is out here. We all know the statistics. We've all seen a litany of stories regarding the conduct.
I know, but no, Darren, now come on, I'm going to pull you up there, because women who get raped in the UK very rarely get arrested for having sex outside marriage, which does happen in.
No, you're right. You're right. We're not on any. We're not on opposite sides in relation to this. I think you're absolutely right. Again, which is why I made that distinction right at the start. That there are issues. What I'm saying is that we live in a patriarchal culture worldwide, where the treatment of women has to improve. Full stop. That's where I was getting to. I probably needed to be much more succinct there. But you're absolutely right. And just because the football has been good, and just because Western women stroke people have had a good experience here, it doesn't mean that the spotlight shouldn't be on those issues. And it's got to remain on those issues out here. And I think we in the West have to keep that spotlight on here, just as we do at home. But as I say, it is important to listen to some of the experience of the women who have been out here, because they've been very instructive for me as much as anybody else. And I can only tell you that during the time I've been here, it has been a very instructive experience for me. And I will come away with a very different experience to the one I expected to have out here.
Okay, it's a good point to end it on.